stay there for another 2 days. But can the party recover from such a brutal disagreement between two of its politicians? Paul Davis reports.
It was smiles and offers of reconciliation from Stephen Woolf today. From his hospital bed, he's been trying to contact the man with whom he was involved in an altercation yesterday. A UKIP colleague, fresh from visiting Mr Woolf this morning, said the recovering MEP has emailed Mike Hookham in an attempt to settle their differences.
Now, Stephen has this morning reached out the hand of friendship to Mr Hookham, to Mike, and has realised that things did go too far in the MEP meeting. So he's made moves forward for keeping us all as a band of friends.
There are still contradictory reports about the argument involving the two that happened shortly before the man tipped to be UKIP's next leader collapsed in the European Parliament. As medics gave him emergency aid, there were claims that earlier yesterday morning Stephen Woolf had been punched, something Mike Hookham has strongly denied.
He came at me and it was basically, it was embarrassing tussle, handbags at dawn, should never have happened. It was embarrassing. There wasn't one punch thrown or landed by me or him, none whatsoever. So I've seen reports that said I slapped him in the face, never happened.
Whatever the case, the President of the European Parliament is clearly not impressed. Martin Schulz issued a statement today saying the reported facts are extremely serious. It goes without saying that disrespectful and violent behaviour does not have a place in the European Parliament. He's promised an inquiry. Nigel Farage, just back from Strasbourg, says the truth will come out, but was clearly upset by opinions being expressed by prominent UKIP figures.
Two senior party officers will take witness statements from everybody inside and outside that room, and we will know by the middle of next week exactly what happened. And I think anybody, any representative of UKIP, going on the airwaves now, opining about something where they weren't even present, I think frankly is wrong.
Stephen Woolf is being kept in hospital for another 48 hours as a precaution. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is outside the hospital in Strasbourg where Stephen Woolf is being monitored. How is he?
Well, as you've just heard, he's staying in for another 2 days, and staff here were sufficiently worried about his head injury overnight to have woken him up 4 times during the night to check that he responded properly. Politically, he's not out of the woods either. A UKIP source told me that following the argument between the two men at this UKIP meeting, it was Mr Woolf who took off his jacket and suggested they take it outside. What happened after that, of course, is now subject to investigation from both UKIP and from the European Parliament, and Parliament officials are now looking at CCTV to find out whether that reveals what exactly went on.
And do you think while those investigations are carried out, do you think the party itself can recover from this episode?
Well, look, UKIP seems to defy the normal rules of politics. Their politicians seem to be able to say things and do things that others can't, and their voters don't leave them. So I'm not sure that this will damage them electorally immediately. However, this does expose deep splits within the party. And if, for example, Stephen Woolf is not allowed to run for the leadership, the party's biggest donor, Aaron Banks, has suggested he may quit the party altogether. And that could be very damaging for UKIP in the future. So it may not be the incident that damages them so much as the fallout afterwards.
Carl Dinnan, thank you. The Bank of England says it's looking into the flash crash that sent the pound plunging overnight. Traders were left baffled by the temporary fall, which saw sterling dive on the Asian markets by as much as 6% before recovering minutes later. Our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. Do we know what caused it yet?
We don't yet, and the pound is only actually partially recovered. Let's have a look at what happened. We've got a chart here. We love a good chart, but this one tells you precisely what happened overnight here in Britain while markets around the world still open currencies are traded 24 hours, you can see in the dead of night over in Asia a sudden rush of activity. The pound falls like a stone, 6% within a matter of minutes, recovers some of the ground, but is still looking pretty bruised and battered so far this morning. Now, the suspicion is that this was an electronic glitch, that what we saw was some pretty aggressive, waspish comments from the French President, François Hollande. He said that Britain would have to pay an economic price, pretty aggressive stuff, but we've heard a lot of it, in truth, ever since the result of the referendum. That the pound fell and maybe triggered some pre-programmed computer thresholds where suddenly computers started selling the pound, ostensibly to protect traders from giant losses. The Bank of England inevitably is looking at this because what was intended as a safety mechanism could have caused mass hysteria and panic on the financial markets. That's not what's happened. Philip Hammond's over in the United States trying to reassure investors that Britain is still a very good place to put their money. And this is an issue because the political, however upbeat politically people sound, the pound is the closest thing we've got to a share price. It's a measure of confidence in the British economy. Strong economies have strong currencies. The pound has weakened quite substantially since this revote. And it matters to you and to me and to everyone else out there because the pound in our pocket buys you less. And in that sense, we are poorer.
Joel, thank you. Colombia's President Juan Manuel Santos has won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was given the award for his efforts to end his country's 52-year civil war with left-wing rebels. Mr. Santos's win comes despite Colombian voters rejecting his peace deal in a referendum just days ago. A new member of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet has said his latest reshuffle is about him regaining control of the Labour Party. The changes began to emerge last night, with more to follow today, but not all the party's MPs are happy about it. Our political correspondent, Paul Brand, is at Westminster. What sort of reaction are we expecting from the latest changes to the shadow cabinet then?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn's critics have spent so long peering over the edge and threatening to jump that they do seem to have developed a bit of vertigo this afternoon and are backing off. None of them want to speak out publicly against his reshuffle. In fact, I spoke to one who said they have taken a collective decision to keep their heads down today. I understand as well there was a meeting among some MPs last night to consider resigning as a bloc from his team, but they decided against that. Now, that doesn't mean they're happy about this reshuffle, quite the contrary. In fact, many feel he's trying to strengthen his position by promoting his allies, including, for example, Diane Abbott, who becomes the new Shadow Home Secretary after her promotion yesterday. Like, for example, Shami Chakrabarti, who becomes the new Shadow Attorney General. Though there was a promotion for one of his critics, Keir Starmer, who becomes the new Shadow Brexit Secretary. And one of Jeremy Corbyn's new appointees told me this afternoon that he has every right to assert his power.
This is, I suppose, Jeremy saying this is a new era in my leadership.
Is that him putting his stamp on things then, saying, actually, I'm in control here?
Well, Jeremy is getting his shadow cabinet team together and making sure that he has the best people doing the best job. And sometimes you have a refreshing of that.
Well, more promotions, more sackings probably this afternoon. The one thing he needs to promote, of course, is party unity.
Paul Brand in Westminster, thank you. Still to come.
I really wish somebody would come in and talk to me about cancer and talk to my friends.
Why coming through cancer was only the start for this woman in Manchester. And the unforgettable Brian Blessed on his unforgettable day at Windsor Castle. All this week, ITV News has been focusing on the ongoing conflict in Syria and the plight of its residents in eastern Aleppo, trapped in the city amid daily bombardments. We've also been keeping a daily count of the bombing. On Wednesday alone, there were 11 airstrikes in the city, resulting in the deaths of 8 people. Our correspondent Emma Murphy has been leading our coverage throughout the week. Emma, a lot of viewers have been getting in touch with the stories that you've brought to us this week, especially those regarding children.
That's right, and we tried to use the stories of children to tell the story of eastern Aleppo, because in a way it goes beyond the politics. It actually shows what's happening there on the ground. And on Monday we covered the situation of two little girls. The first was a 4-year-old girl called Iman. She had been out getting water when she picked up a cluster bomb. It went off and it did very serious harm, and it was with great sadness on Tuesday we had to report that she had died. Overnight. The medical teams were not able to keep her alive. Also in that same report we featured a little girl that I'm sure people will remember, because she had a bandaged head and her leg, for her own safety to stop her falling out of the bed, had been tied to the side of the cot so that she couldn't roll off. Now, she did look desperately ill that night, and we were quite concerned that perhaps it would be a similarly bleak picture. We have been told, though, in the last day that little girl is still alive. Her name is Jodie. Nobody knew who she was because nobody had claimed her. Well, actually, she is not on her own in this world, as we'd feared. Her parents did finally come forward after the chaos of the airstrike that they'd been caught up in. They didn't know where she was. They found her. She's had significant surgery on these very significant brain injuries, but they've been able to take her home. Let's be clear, that's not a great situation. She is very, very seriously ill and living in a place that's under bombardment, but she is at least alive.
Yeah, and a tiny glimmer of hope with her being reunited. In terms of those who aren't in hospital, what news?
Well, one of the families we featured the other night lived on a street in Aleppo. We use that as an example of how things have changed. It went from somewhere where children played out to a place where you saw the children cowering in the house as what looked like snow came down, and actually it was the dust from an attack. An hour or so after we spoke to them, when that piece had gone out, we were told they had left their homes. They were extremely concerned about the ground offensive that was underway. We've heard from them again this morning. They haven't been able to get out of Aleppo. They have gone into hiding somewhere else in the city. And we're told that the Syrian regime troops are just 15 metres from where we filmed them that day.
Emma Murphy, thank you. Thank you for all the work this week. Thank you. And you can watch our films and specially written accounts on our website, itv.com/news. A child and 14 adults have been arrested after being found in the back of a freezer lorry. The driver of the van has stopped at a service station on the M25 after hearing banging coming from the rear of the vehicle. The 15 were taken to hospital for medical checks and have been detained on suspicion of illegal entry. 1 in 2 of us will fight cancer at some point in our lives, but the disease is often more difficult for teenagers because they are diagnosed later than others. As part of our series this week on the issue, today we meet a woman whose own illness as a teen left her committed to helping others to get diagnosed as early as they can. Victoria Grimes has her story.
OK, early warning signs then. So I said to you at the beginning, cancer in young people is very, very rare. But what we can do by sharing with you what to look out for is make sure that if ever any of you do develop any of these symptoms, you can get to the doctor as early as possible.
Kelly Scott knows only too well the pain and trauma childhood cancer can bring. At 18, she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Kelly was lucky she won her fight, and now she's devoted her life to educating youngsters about the disease.
I didn't understand how I could have cancer. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I did lots of sport. I didn't get it. We arm them with the knowledge of the signs and symptoms, who to speak to about them and how they can reduce their risk in the future. We can play a part in improving early diagnosis.
Through her work with the Teenage Cancer Trust, Kelly visits schools like Wellington School in Manchester to speak of her own experiences and to help raise awareness of symptoms. The charity are continuing the work of Stephen Sutton, whose fight against the disease touched the nation.
I think Stephen Sutton made cancer a topic that people felt a bit more comfortable to talk about, so they're able to open up about their own experiences and their concerns and their fears, which makes it easier for everybody. And he was really keen on the Teenage Cancer Trust education programme. He wanted to get into as many schools as possible and to make young people aware that cancer does happen. These are the things that we can do to support you. These are the things that you can do to support your friends, and let's just talk about it.
Anyone can get it, and if you spot it sooner, then you can treat it sooner.
Let's hope that by educating them now, these youngsters will become the generation who aren't afraid to talk about cancer. Victoria Grimes, ITV News.
Finally, he's loved around the world for his booming voice and excellence on stage. Today, the actor Brian Blessed has received an OBE. Just after the ceremony, he spoke to Sally Lockwood.
Here we are at Windsor Castle. I'm with Brian Blessed, OBE. Congratulations. How did the conversation go with the Queen today?
Well, it was marvellous. I mean, she smiled and smiled. She's got this wonderful quality. You've only got a short space of time with her. She's got to see so many people. I think it's about 64, 65.
What did she ask you about?
Well, she asked me about my charity work, mainly. So I discussed, really, her son. Prince Charles, he and I do a lot of work. I'm one of his ambassadors going around the country. I was president of the national parks and all that, so I did a lot of work with him. And the Duke of Edinburgh award schemes, presenting prizes and medals, bronze, silver and gold, to lots of young students going on expeditions. So we talked about that.
Do you find you have to lower your voice when you're speaking to her?
Well, I have got huge vocal cords. They are twice the normal size. And so I kind of always had this relationship with the royal family. I think what's marvellous is that I'm the son of a coal miner from South Yorkshire, a C class.
And
so that, well, anything's possible. You know, I think that anything in life is possible. And anyone who turns down awards from the Queen, they need to kick up the derriere. You know, I just feel it's a great... you see, it's for my mother and father who don't exist now, and for my teachers and all the people who've done so much for me. I feel it's for them.
And if you were to pass your wisdom on to the next generation, having done so much in your life, what would you say?
Well, it's something I often repeat. People say, is it not dangerous going to Mount Everest, going to the North Pole, and all the other expeditions I go on, and even the parts I play like King Lear at my age? And I say, well, the greatest danger in life is not taking the adventure. I'm happy all the time. I'm repeating myself here when I say, I do get up in the morning, I do look in the mirror, and I do see myself, and I love myself. I know I look like a gorilla, and I look like a yeti, you know, but I've got the body of a gorilla, and so forth. But I just love life. I can't wait to get up in the morning, be with my dogs, be with my wife, and be with people.
And the nation loves you too. Brian Blessed, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Brian Blessed, OBE, talking to Sally Lockwood. That's it this lunchtime. From everyone here, bye-bye.